All right. Hey, everybody, welcome. This is Steve Cady at Bowling Green State University with our All Things Change. Not really that. Now it's the Change 2025 series. We had evolved this and we have been working on the concept of change for many years with Nexus for Change coming around in 2007 when we did our first conference. And that evolved into Nexus for Change, which is the host now for this. And it's been a really amazing journey. It's almost 20 years if you think about it, and that's pretty amazing. And we have the Change Handbook, and now we have the Collaborative Change Handbook that's coming out next year. We have the Collaborative Change Library, which you can get online, which is an 8-volume set. We have Bowling Green State University, which sponsors this, along with the Academy of Management's OD&C division. And we're looking at the MC division possibly sponsoring. A lot of people want to be a part of this intersection or this nexus of all things that are related to human-centered approaches to change in organizations. We have our doctoral program. We have a few students here from the doctoral program, alumni and current students in our professional doctoral program in organization development and change. The program is focused on helping people, our students, advance their professional joy through thought leadership, particularly focused on applying the human-centered approaches to their profession and the things that they care about. And it's a great program, great students. I'm so blessed to be a part of that. With us here today, we also have Lisa. Wave, say hi, Lisa. I think Teo is here somewhere. Teo is the associate director for the program and also help part of this series. Lisa's our producer director, so she runs the thing. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. And last but not least is our reason for being here today. So I'm a fan of Bill Rothwell's. He is not only prolific in what he produces, he's also passionate and he cares very much. You have 170 plus books, count
174.
174 and counting. You have founded programs and directed more dissertations than probably anybody I know. How many dissertations?
120. 120.
120 you've chaired.
Yes.
And in addition to all of that, he has his consulting practice and he does work out in the field. He's a scholar practitioner and he does academic work and he does practical work and he does in-between work. He has books on everything and anything that relates to human-centered change and human-centered approaches to creating high-performing organizations. I admire you so much, not for just what you've accomplished, but for who you are as a human being. And I'm really grateful that I can count you amongst my peers and friends. I'm really grateful for that. We have a book that we have coming out in 2026. It's the 5th edition of Practicing OD, and it's a multi-author collection. How many authors do we have? I don't remember the number.
36, I believe.
36 authors, almost that many chapters. And on every topic and variety of topics related to the field of organization development and change. And that'll be coming out in the spring. It'll be coming out late fall, and I think it's be a late fall, spring in that range.
So I think they're targeting January 26.
Yeah, I think so. So we're really fortunate to have you here. And it's kind of cool how you have shifted gears, you leveling up and getting and really kind of staying on the leading edge. And I think it's really fascinating to see how you stay on the cutting edge. I'm really curious how you do that, and what motivates you to stay on the leading edge. And then I'd love to hear you share us about the topic for the day. So I'll turn it over to you, Bill. But again, thank you. I'm really grateful that you're here.
Thank you. And I'm delighted to be speaking to the group. Let me be pulling up my slides while we are talking. I will warn you that I have a habit over preparing slides, so I usually have far more material than I have time to go through it. That's typical for me. You can see a number of my titles on the title slide. I just retired from Penn State on 1st of July of 25. they made a buyout offer, a year's salary to retire. So I took the deal, and but it left a lot of students. I took 10 PhD students with me into retirement, meaning I'm still the chair of their committee. And so I'm doing that in addition to enjoying the beginnings of retirement. So let's get started. Do you feel that most college courses are as engaging as they could possibly be, somewhat engaging, or capable of being made more engaging? What do you think? You don't have to vote on this, but just think about it. How engaging is the average college course to a student? And I want you to be thinking about that. That was the challenge that I wanted to undertake. I've been teaching OD for 32 years, Penn State, and one of the consistent suggestions that my students have had over the years is they wanted hands-on experience rather than courses in OD. That's a tough thing to do when you have to meet credit generation requirements and that sort of thing. What do we know about the way college courses are delivered? Well, there's limited research on that, believe it or not, but we know that about 55% of classes, at least in one field, are all pure lecture, and those are deadly. And then we have about 27% using some lecture discussion, and then we have only 18% that are really student-centered. Yet the research says that the more we can engage students and participants in education, the more likely they are to be able to apply what they've learned, the more likely they are to stick with degree programs that they've enrolled in, less likely to drop out of courses. And so one of the challenges for professors and instructors is finding better ways to engage students. And of course, we know that is also true in business and industry and in work organizations. Engagement is a buzzword, and often it's one that sometimes the money doesn't match the talk about it. The senior executive teams may not put the money behind engagement efforts, but when they face a lot of turnover, then companies do start to cough up money for engagement programs because they know engagement correlates to turnover. Higher the engagement, the lower the turnover rates. So, how do we build engagement in college courses and in other venues like corporate training sessions? How do we go about that? We live in an age where a lot of instruction is delivered online. That's what I did at Penn State. In 2014, we launched an all online master's degree program in OD. There are currently 150 students in that degree program from all over the world. And we have a PhD program with a specialization in the PhD at the end of that degree. So we have essentially a feeder program. Master's degree leads in, the best students end up in the doctoral program. We have minimum experience requirements. We don't just let anybody in. You have to have some work experience related to the field. Let me get right into the introduction of the talk. And I've actually been doing that, but we want to talk today about simulations and gaming as ways to build engagement for students. There are a lot of ways to do simulations, and I want to talk about that. Often when we think of a simulation, we think of a video game like experience. Those are quite expensive to build with current technology. The technology is getting cheaper. There are a lot of vendors in that space, and the prices are dropping. But right now, at least at my school, we don't have a big budget to invest in hiring external vendors come in and refit our college courses to be simulation based. But that's really what would be desirable. So, my targets for this session, why we really need more engagement in our educational experiences, how we can use case studies and role plays combined to develop low cost and fast simulations, and how this approach is especially appropriate for teaching practical topics like OD, like HR, like training and development, similar fields. So, a little bit about me. You heard some of that from Steve's nice introduction. I had 20 years of full time experience in government and in a multinational company in HR and OD before I joined Penn State 32 years ago. I've authored 174 books. I've delivered 1,700 plus professional talks in 15 countries, done consulting with 50 multinational companies. And one of the interesting things about me is I've visited China 83 times to do public speaking, teach at every major university. And I've been to Singapore 32 times to do consulting for their government and a number of other things. Here are some of my books. The very first one is the one with Steve that's about to come out in January. We've got the cover of the book, even if the book is not yet in print. So we know that's what the cover is going to look like. But here are a few other covers: Facilitating OD Interventions. That's a book about, it's a book of simulations with 20 simulations of different OD interventions like World Cafe, like large scale group events, like team building, 20 interventions in the book. Another book that's relevant to today's talk is the one on the right, Revolutionizing the Online Learning Journey. And that book contains 1,500 ways to make online learning more engaging. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on covers, but I'll just show you some of my more recent books so you get a sense of the kind of books in that list of 174. Specifically today, we want to talk more about the book in the middle here, Experiencing Organization Development. That book, just published, is a full-length simulation suitable to be used as a college textbook to teach OD, and do it with case study, role play, and get the student to act out role of consultant and of client. So I published many other books on OD, but let's get to it. So here's the problem I faced. I told you that one of the problems I saw in teaching OD over 32 years was that students consistently said that they wanted a hands-on experience more than lecture discussion. And that's difficult to do, I thought, in a college class. That all came to a head during the pandemic year when we were forced to teach all online. And the way our courses are set up at Penn State is they're totally asynchronous. That means you don't need to log in at a specific day and time. Courses open 24/7, 365 for people to log in, go through, print, online material, like write blogs, like write assignments and quizzes and things of that sort, a typical design for most online learning. We quickly discovered students did not find that engaging format. They wanted more human interaction. And in a field like OD, you can appreciate the need for that. So at the same time, if we teach OD in the traditional lecture discussion format, we end up with students who have a superficial understanding of the field. They just don't get it. They don't see how OD is different from other types of consulting, like performance consulting, a topic I have also written about and researched. They end up with a disconnect, at least in my experience at Penn State, between theory, practical application. And in OD, some concepts just have to be experienced if you want to learn it. It's not the kind of thing, it's like swimming. You don't learn it by watching people do it. You learn it by jumping in the water and trying to swim, have other people coach you about how to do it while you are almost drowning. And that's the best way to learn things. So there's also complexity of systems thinking. We know we emphasize in OD that it's all about open systems thinking. My experience is students don't understand that until they've actually fulfilled the role of a consultant or experienced the role of a client in a change effort. And one thing that started to happen, at least at Penn State, I can't speak for Bowling Green or other institutions. During the pandemic, we started to see a problem with student attendance for classes, whether online or on site. People just didn't show up for class. And a lot of that, I hypothesized, had to do with engagement. That was not just me alone. I checked with other faculty. They were complaining about the same problems. And we also had an increasing problem of students who were unwilling to do pre-reading assignments. Even at the Ph.D. level, we had students who wouldn't do advanced reading for class. So I had to institute top quizzes and put half their grade at risk, top quiz performance, in order to ensure people actually did advanced reading and showed up for class. So how did we meet this challenge of low engagement, low class attendance, difficulty getting people to engage with the content by reading? Well, one thing we did was launch a research effort on how to make online learning more engaging. And I did a research project. We did many focus groups, many interviews. We emailed out to many faculty groups, many corporate trainers, and we asked them, how do you build engagement in your online courses? And the result was the book you see here with 1,500 ways to increase engagement. And it's meant to be like a buffet, a smorgasbord. The assumption is an instructor will not use all 1,500 in one course, but rather have a buffet of choices that he or she can go through and select in order to build engagement in the courses they teach, so that they can, as they design course, can refer to this book and find many different ways to bake in engagement strategies as part of the course design. So that's one thing we did. Another effort we launched was investigations into simulations, case studies, role plays, and critical incident methods. And I'll define these terms as we go through. So a case study, of course, you're all familiar with that. It's an in-depth examination, and it works best if it's a real situation. Role play, we get people to act out their role in play acting something. And there's a long tradition of role play in education, particularly in the social sciences, where we have, for example, psychologists playing the role of therapists, working with clients, and they get hands-on experience through a role play, and they can avoid hurting people who, if they worked with real clients and they had no experience, this could be hurtful. But if they work with other students, then they have an opportunity to simulate a real therapeutic situation. So the same logic can work for OD. I did research on simulations, and it turns out that the definition of a simulation is, in simple terms, a case study combined with role play. So if you do a case study and then you have the people in the case studies, you have the readers out characters in a case study, that is a simulation. And you can pair it with critical incident method, which is a short situation drawn from real life, and people are given a problem situation and they have to respond with what they would do that situation. And then the students can talk about how they would respond to that situation. You'll see an example a little later. So we wanted to build a book around this approach of combining case study, role play, and critical incident. Wanted an experiential learning environment, and the design was set up so that each scene or chapter in the book had a key concepts component, which opened with, and we designed the book around the two key models, the action research model and the appreciative inquiry model. And I plan to use the book in my entry-level OD course for first-year doctoral students. And so that was the target audience. They'd had some exposure to OD. Many of them had work experience. They may not have had a classroom or online experience talking about what is OD and giving the theoretical background. So each chapter started with the key concepts, then moved on to the case story. The case story was built on an actual OD intervention. Then there was an opportunity for the students to discuss the case in breakout groups. Then they got to role play out the situation, the case story, and they would, over the weeks of the course, they would get opportunities to play client as well as consultant. Many of them found that a very intriguing idea because they had played the role of OD consultant, but never been in the shoes of the client. We also wanted them to experience the role of the internal OD consultant as well as an external OD consultant, knowing that there's a big debate in the field about how different those two roles really are. Then they debriefed. We had to be selective in what we did because we wanted the design to fit in any kind of college experience or retraining experience that where a lot of classes are in 1 hour time segments. So we wanted to be able to get through all of this in a 1 hour.
Bill, it looks like you got muted somehow.
Unmute. Am I back?
You are back. Thank you.
Thank you. Very strange.
You missed
Anyway,
about 15, 20 seconds, maybe.
okay, good. Thank you. So each chapter in the book builds skills. So we want to build OD skills. And here's an example. We call that a token. And the token refers to a step of either the action research model or the appreciative inquiry model and the skills that we're trying to build each scene or chapter. I've already talked through these sections. So what did this design look like? Well, I had different variations. I'm about to tell you about the 3.5 years that we pilot tested this approach online, on site, with undergraduates, with graduate students, and even at conferences with practicing OD consultants. So we use this approach in all those venues to perfect it and basically give it more than one shakedown cruise. We learned a lot of things along the way. So one thing was the pre-class preparation. We could ask students to read the case study, and we learned pretty quickly that the shorter the case study, the better off we were. Why? Because students don't want to read advanced material for class. Many of them have day jobs in the Penn State program, and they show up for class and they did not get an opportunity to read the homework assignment. So we had to keep the cases brief so that people could actually do them while they were analyzing them. Quite a challenge. And then the second step was the breakout discussions about the case, posing some questions about them. Then we would have the students debrief those discussions. Then we would have them break into breakout groups yet again and do a role play. And an optional component allowed for a gaming component. And we built in a scoring sheet, had observers watching the characters enact role plays, and then give them a score based on a set of standards of behavior. And from those, we could score each breakout team and start to create a little bit of competition cross group. And that way we could build in a gaming component. Gaming piece is still a work in progress. And there was quite a lot of debate among my students about how much we really want competition in we really want consultants competing with each other in a helping situation. So that's a philosophical question. So we did experiment with many variations of this approach. One idea is to add a theoretical overview of current research on the topic at the opening of each scene, like summarize the last 5 years of research on a given step of the model, like the entry step or the assessment and feedback step of the model. We experimented with critical incidents, and using those, students found those very engaging. And again, they had to be based on real world experience. There are many other ways we can vary the format. We can flip it around. Some of the students wanted to role play first and have a very brief case situation, just a few sentences like a critical incident, and then build the role play around that. So it's important in each of these cases to experiment. But the whole goal of this is engagement, more engagement, and give the student the experience to feel like they've actually been there and done that as an OD consultant so that they can skill build and learn from each other in the process. So our first pilot test of this approach was in the fall of 21. We did over 20 plus simulations in various venues. We did it online at the PSU conference. We went to ISODC and did a simulation event there. We were at the ATD or Dev conference and did a simulation with about 80 people. We did a full on-site class, a full semester long course using the simulation approach. And we had touched more than 100 participants, it's well over that, to try out this approach. So just to give you a sense of the design, again, here's the model of the action research process that we used as the basis for the book's design. This is just one of the two. Remember, the appreciative inquiry model was the other one, and we used the 5D model for that. So there was a case and a role play and a critical incident activity for each step so that we could skill build through the process. Book also came with a 560-page instructor guide and also a full list of video accompaniment for every scene. These are like cartoon versions. You get a sense of what those slides look like on this slide. So we had many PowerPoints, and we wanted to make it so that the instructor would have many different resources from which to choose in order to teach basic course in OD. Here's how we would give directions for a role play, and we'd play the Jeopardy song, you know, the time song when people were enacting the role play, so they had a sense that time was fleeting and they only had a certain amount of time. And that was the one feedback that we got from the students, is that every time we did simulation, they said they wished they had more time. And we said, congratulations, that's always a problem in OD. You never have enough time. So let's try out an example. So here's a brief case study. Remember, I said we learned that they needed to be short. You receive an email from a prospective OD client who's asking you for help on conducting team building per department. You've never worked with this client before. You know nothing about the person calling you or her company. Her name is Marcia Ronaldson. She tells you in the email that the need for the team building stems from problem of conflict within the department. You know nothing more than that about the client, problem, company, or of which her team is part. So what do you do? So that's the case. Here are the discussion questions. Remember, this was the second part. Given the information you were given on the preceding slide, what would you do? So now I open this for discussion. You can unmute, you can use your chat box. We don't need to do this part in breakout groups. I want discussion here at this point. So what would you do if you got this email? And by the way, I got a real email like that. So this is based on a real situation. So my response comes from my own experience as an OD consultant. So what would you do if you got that email? Who would like to answer? Do we have somebody in the chat box?
There are some chat responses. Ask open-ended questions. One response is pause and reflect. I feel like my response would be something along the lines of, yes, I'd love to help you. Please tell me more.
Ask for a phone call, you know, thank you. At least a phone call, probably a Zoom meeting if we could arrange it. Not every client is comfortable with that. At least an email follow-up. What else? What else could we do? Would we want to, in the second question, it says, what other options would you have to answer this? And like Zoom, like email, like phone call. And what's popular today, and I can't figure it out, but I've got clients who insist on speaking on WhatsApp. They don't want email. They don't want Zoom. They just want WhatsApp. That's a pain in the ass, to tell you the truth, because you can't really engage people with such short messaging. So, but you would want more background information, wouldn't you? And a smart consultant is going to ask for more information. Well, what prompts this problem? Why do you think it's happening? What have you done so far? Can you give me information about your organization? Clients don't want to pay you to onboard. They want you to come to them with some knowledge of their organization. So you get the idea. That's what I'm trying to do in today's talk, is just give you a taste what this approach is like so that you have a feel for it. Okay, here is the breakout. And I think we do have time. We got about 5 minutes. Lisa, I think, is going to try to help me with this. I am not a tech wizard. You will learn that quickly. Couldn't even figure out how to unmute my mic. But here's the challenge. Devote 5 minutes to the role play. Assume you're able to reach this person by Zoom, one in the case. Describe how you would organize the meeting. Now, this is what you're doing in your role play. Then 2 people on the team should play the part of OD consultants. 1 person should play the part of the client. So we want at least 4 people on a team, as many as 7. And we want 2 people to be OD consultants. So you have to decide who will do that. Then 1 person will be the client. And anyone else in the group is an observer. Watch group dynamics. Be prepared to report out what they observed in the group. When we return, I'll pull the observers to describe what they saw happening in their groups. We won't have time to do all the groups. I'll just ask for a couple of volunteers. So, Lisa, can you organize them into breakouts? And we're going to give them strictly 5 minutes.
Yes, I am just moving people around a little bit since the makeup changed just a little bit. So give me just one moment. Let's see.
So you should all momentarily see an invitation to a breakout group. Please be so kind to join, maybe unmute and say hello. And Bill, could you for a second go back to the slide? There was somebody in the chat requesting to go back to the scenario slide for a second.
Which one? This slide?
Yeah, are these the questions that you want us to ponder, or?
Here's the instructions for the role play right there. Is that what you want?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. Lisa, are we ready?
Yeah, I've opened the rooms.
Excellent. Thank you. Kamisha and David, do you all have an invitation? Maria?
I don't think I do, at least not that I see. And I'm usually pretty okay about.
Lisa, I lost your audio for some reason.
Yeah, David, I had asked whether you wanted to go.
Oh, I'm
one, so
sorry, I didn't see that.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, sure. I'll join one. That's fine.
Okay, great. Let's see.
Kamisha might be in listen only mode. Dolly, did you have an invitation? Were you able to follow one? We might have some folks that are in listen only mode and aren't able to join a breakout.
Well, I sent the screenshot of the situation.
Awesome.
Hopefully that came through in the chat for them.
Okay, but
And
we got,
I would say like maybe 3 more minutes. Does that sound good?
yeah, we got 3 groups with at least 3, right? It looks like.
Okay. Tally might be in a place where she can't join.
So is it, Theo, is it the volume of the mic or is it the sound quality?
The volume is fine.
Huh.
All right.
Strange. Okay,
But we
everybody
got
back?
not yet. We got about 30 more seconds, and they must be having good conversations because they're not all jumping right back into the main room. So looks like they're looking to use every available second. That's excellent.
That's good.
Yeah,
Well, that shows engagement. It's
indeed.
exactly what we're trying to achieve.
Here they come. All right, welcome back, everyone.
So who would like to do a quick debrief of what we need? An observer, a volunteer, to share with us what happened in your team. You don't need to tell us who were the individuals. If that would make them uncomfortable, then you don't need to share names. Just tell us what happened in your team group. We need a volunteer.
Rihanna, if you're willing to share, there you
Yeah,
are.
there, I'm unmuted. Bill, I'm going to report to you that our group spent the whole time introducing ourselves to each other. So we never actually did the task. We were just about to. And so sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, that's an occupational hazard,
Yeah.
I guess. And it's true that 5 minutes is not a long time to be given. You might see why the people who participated in this approach would constantly provide feedback that they needed more time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a consistent feedback we got across many different groups. They did get engaged with this. They just didn't feel they had enough time to go through it fully. So that's important to understand.
Can I ask you a question, Bill?
Sure.
Have you yourself, with your colleagues, whoever was involved with you in creating the book and all of these activities and designing them and so forth, did you personally ever have the same experience of being given 5 minutes in a group of 5 to do this task? You have,
Yes,
and you did it. You got an A, I assume.
I did, followed through. I was a good boy. I did what I was supposed to do. But not all my students are good boys and girls, and they don't always do what I ask them. So we know how. And that's why I sometimes talk about children. You know, people who are 60 years of age can behave like children. So
Thank you.
any other observer, did we have an observer from a team that was able to get through at least a little bit of a role play experience? Anybody?
They're all shy this morning. We have one response in the chat where Jake shares that in his group, their consultant asked the question, "Why did you call me?" And he thought that that was a helpful question to guide the conversation.
Okay, and it is. In the entry phase, we often want to know why we got the call, and because we want to assess client expectations. We know that in the OD world that many of our clients come from one of two major sources. One of those is word of mouth, which is historically true. That's been true for many years. And more recent years, LinkedIn and other social media platforms are a second major source of clients. So quite often the way OD people market their services is through word of mouth or through social media platforms. That's important to know if you want to make a living doing OD work, because few of us are marketing wizards. I always joke with my students. I say, you need to help me with the marketing. I can't sell a $10 bill. So you need to help me with the marketing. Okay, we'll move on. So can you think of ways we could gamify that role play? So the way I thought of it was we could provide the observers with a scoring sheet. They could score the behavior of the actors and actresses in the role play. Then across breakout groups, we could compare scores. That way, may be able to identify a winner of a group of breakout groups. So that's a way to gamify and create an element of competition. But I will tell you that my students found that very controversial. Some of them said, well, OD shouldn't be about competing with each other. It should be about collaborating with each other. And so competition built into the experience might send the wrong message to people. I don't know what you think about that, but can you think of other ways we might be able to gamify a role play? I don't have an answer for this. I'm challenging you to think about it. If we go through a role play and we want to increase the engagement, David, he's raised his hand. Go ahead. Nope, you're muted.
So one thought would be to use your breakout time as a preparatory period where you have them decide who's going to play what roles, and then you bring everybody back together and you have 2-minute role plays where you go around, have each group do their role play, and then you could have some sort of an election process to select the very best one based on the principles you're trying to teach.
Okay, that's a good answer. And we did try out the idea of a fishbowl where we have all the groups watch a central group like me and some collaborators that I would bring in, other OD people, like experienced OD people, who show them maybe the better way, not necessarily the right way in quotes, but good way to do the role play, and then show them what that looked like, and then let them go through it as a way to help them role model appropriately. So that's another variation, but how to gamify, I'm still struggling with that, or even given the feedback I got, whether we should gamify it. Lisa, go ahead.
So something I was just rolling around in my mind was, can you gamify to where it is positive in that, just in what that feedback had been, right? Like you're against each other. Could we design something that's for each other? And so, for example, in my head, just because there's not enough time here, I'm thinking of like a tag team approach, and maybe you're getting more points for the more people you connect to. So that's what I'm trying to, in my brain, pull apart and put back together.
Okay. I did have a team of doctoral students working on this whole notion of gamify. And what they came up with was they said, scrap the whole idea of a role play. They wanted to create more of a Monopoly game type of format where people would have a board game where they would go through, and each player would play the role of an OD consultant going through a board game experience. It never really worked. So they couldn't come up with a concept that was really good. So that was a failed attempt. So we're still struggling with that.
There's some interesting comments in the chat. Jake, for example, is suggesting if I were designing a simulation for salespeople, I would include very competitive elements. For OD professionals, it seems they are much more collaborative. So it might look more like how can we improve rather than how can we win.
Good idea. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm still struggling with it, and if anybody has ideas, by all means, I'd love to talk to you offline.
Yeah, Bill, we'll talk, and Bill, I'll talk with you some more about that because I went to the simulation training center at the Cleveland Clinic, and they have a major simulation center. They do training in how to do simulation-based training. Learned a bunch in that. I have a simulation, and I have a kind of a game-based experience too. I'll share some of that with you offline, but in general, I think one of the things it's a lot of the pre-setup work is really key. And I think you alluded to this and discussed that you got to create the conditions for people to enter into the experience. And then you have to give a lot of time to debrief the experience. And I think you also alluded to that. So, I think those are two really key points. I think the other thing is helping people understand that they're entering into this proximal zone of learning, and in that zone there's a level of stress, and part of the role play goal is for them to learn how to self-regulate and self-manage in that. And so there's two things: of you're learning content, you're learning practices, but you're also learning self-regulation, and helping them know that that's what's going on for them, and then pausing throughout to help them process that is really, I think, important. And I think some students will sometimes go, well, we don't want to compete because we want to like each other. And we got, however, the problem is with this whole AI, and you and I know this, we have got to teach these skills of how to deal in competitive environments, because when AI removes everything else, all that's going to be left is how do we sharpen each other's edges as human beings, and how are we going to work together, and how are we going to collaborate, how are we going to lean into difficult conversations, how are we going to manage all of these challenges that we have to manage in the human environment. We can't avoid it, and we have to learn how to move out of that limbic place and learn how to manage and really utilize the prefrontal cortex to self-regulate. All of that is important to this. So I think avoiding those things is avoiding helping people become more quintessentially human, is what I would say.
All right. Well, let me wrap up here because I'm sensitive to timing.
Yeah.
So we did create a worksheet for the whole gamification component, and we've been playing with that, trying to develop standards for what to expect in terms of ideal behavior from OD practitioners. We did learn some things from this whole experience of field testing over more than 3 years. Keeping the case study short, we learned that in a multi-week course, students even forget the names of the characters, even though they're the same from week to week. They can't remember who's in the case study and what the case is all about. So we solved that problem with short video segments to give them a refresher on the organization, the names of the people, and then flashcards so that they knew who the characters were that they were asked to role play. So that's toward the end. So again, engagement was the whole reason I embarked on these 2 studies, one to find ways to make online and on-site learning more engaging, the other centered around simulations built at low cost, which I emphasize, since we have no budget, at least in my department, for handling building simulations. So we had to do it on the cheap. So I'll open it to any final questions, but here's my email and some covers as a conclusion. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd love to hear what, if anybody wants to bring a question up, we can bring the whole community back together on the screen. In the chat, what I'd love for you all to do is so we can crowdsource a little bit for those of you, if you could type in, what are you still curious about from this, and what's your one takeaway from this? So what are you still curious about as you listen? And what's a takeaway, that's something that you learned that you appreciated? And if you could put that into the chat, I'd welcome that. And then if anybody wishes to come in live and share maybe something that they have as well as a question, and then we'll move into the second phase of the session today.
I do have some handouts for this, one of which is a write-up on my thinking on experiential learning. So that's
That would be great. Yeah. Could you share
in the
that?
chat box. And
Yeah.
then the other handout is the example of the worksheet we use to grade the quality of role play performance. And that's the second handout that I'm putting in the chat. So everybody can see
Yeah,
that.
great. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for sharing that. There's a variety of resources and things that Teo has been putting in here. Thank you, Teo and Lisa. So with that, let's jump into the next phase. So what we're doing next is we are looking at establishing and elevating the field through professionalization. And Bill, you are one of the leading thinkers in professionalization and competencies and those kinds of things. And one of the challenges and opportunities within the field of ODC is that we have not professionalized in a, what I would say, evidence-based way, in terms of having a clear set of competencies and then moving that into some certifications and accreditations that really validate the training and the level of competency in the field, and also to establish a baseline for the field around knowledge frameworks, the key resources, and so forth. As you know, there's lots of great knowledge out there from years ago that should still be used, and there's some that doesn't need to be, and there's new knowledge that we want. We have to have a mechanism by which we can keep that knowledge base current and also stay true to the origins and some of the real good, what I would call classic work that is still relevant, it's timeless. So with all of that, I want to ask you a few questions. And you've got the questions, but if you didn't even look at them, you could answer these like that. And this is a sports center uh, 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 conversation we're going to have, in the sense that I'm going to ask you the questions and you just give me your top of mind thoughts. And then we're going to follow up with everybody for deeper dives and other research. David Bright is here with me. This is a research study portion. We're going to qualitatively analyze and thematically analyze this, and it's going to flow into some publications that are going to come out of these conversations. And we have the series of questions. And for those that are here, what's really great is just to hear your nuggets. These are things where people, I notice when I'm watching the camera, sometimes people are taking lots of notes, because everything that you're mentioning is stuff they want to go look up or see and whatnot. So it's really kind of cool. But we'll be capturing all of this for everybody here as well. And it's also recorded, so you can always come back to it. So we're going to jump in, and it's focused on the field of ODC. And so the first thing I'd like to ask you is, how do you define, but really describe the field of ODC? And how do you describe it now, and how has that description shifted over time for you?
Yeah, I think over time, one of the things that I've come to focus on was regarding OD, and not everyone will agree with me in what I say, but I believe that there is a distinct difference between an OD consultant's role, that of a performance consultant. And if you're unfamiliar with performance consulting, actually, when I designed the program at Penn State, I used the competency model that I developed along with Chris Worley and Rollin Sullivan. And that was the official competency study for OD Network for many years before it was phased out with the current competency study that is currently up there. But my point is that I've come to believe that OD should be a non-directive approach to consulting. By that, I mean that a lot of people expect when they deal with a consultant to get the answer man who can give them the quick answer based on expert knowledge, what we call the medical model to consulting, where the consultant comes in, does your diagnosis for you, gives you a treatment recommendation, and walks away, and it's up to management to implement the results. I believe OD is fundamentally the opposite of that. That we're much more like clinical psychologists of the Carl Rogers School of Psychology. And I emphasize that because there are 200 schools of psychology, not all of them identical. But the mainstream is the Rogerian view, humanistic psychology, that says that the consultant's role, the clinical psychologist's role, is not to tell the client what their problem is. Because in psychology, if you don't already know what your problem is, you can't be treated. So you already know you're an alcoholic when you go to see a clinical psychologist. You already know you're a drug abuser when you go to see a psychologist. You already know you're a gambler if you go to see a psychologist. So it's fundamentally different from the medical model. The non-directive approach assumes that the client may know what their problem is, but in an organizational setting, we have many clients. Quite often, a psychologist is dealing with individuals with maladjustments, with a problem, some kind of psychological problem. OD people are dealing with healthy people, mentally healthy people for the most part, and they are the true experts about what the organization's problems are, what its solutions should be, what are the priorities to implement the solutions, what should be the action plans to implement, what should be the metrics by which to measure success. So OD, to me, is fundamentally like the Rogerian view of humanistic psychology. And in that respect, I tell my students, you absolutely never tell the client what to do. But that's quite a challenge for my students. I had one student who took 20 doctoral courses with me, 20 courses. And in every course, he heard, never tell the client what to do. And the first time I took him on a consulting visit with me, in the first 5 minutes, he told the client what to do. The point here is the minute I tell people what to do, the problem stops being their problem and it becomes my problem. The solution stops being their solution and it becomes my solution. When they implement it badly and it all goes wrong, they blame me for the problem. And that's exactly the issue that clinical psychologists learn from the humanistic approach to psychology. That's the whole basis of the Rogerian view. So not everybody agrees with me that OD is a non-directive field. The idea of collaborative interaction suggests there's give and take. But I emphasize the non-directive nature of OD. So that's a controversial, some would say in this field, position to take. But that's what you might call the Penn State view of the OD field.
So say one piece about the collaborative process. I didn't quite couldn't quite track on what you were saying about the collaborative process, because you have the collaborative process in your book, right? In the simulation book, yeah, you talk about the large group approaches and engagement. So
Right.
so say a little bit more about that.
Collaboration to me sounds like give and take. That you tell me about your problems, and I might give you suggestions, I might give you advice, and you can choose to take it or leave it. But the risk of that is that the client regards that as an absolute directive. And when we grow up, when we're children, we look to our parents and we think our parents always have the right answer to every problem. And then when we go to school, through school, we think our teachers have the answer to every problem we face. When we go to college, we think our professors have all the answers. And when we go to work, we think our boss has all the answers. And some of us, when we're married, think our spouse has all the answers to problems. Point I'm making is a lot of people want to avoid responsibility for their own problems, and collaboration has the risk associated with it of people short-circuiting, taking responsibility for their own problems and wanting to grab on to anything the consultant tells them and regard that as an absolute requirement and view that as medicine the way a doctor would prescribe it to you. And then that way they can throw up their hands and wash their hands of all responsibility for taking action. So
Yeah, that's
I
powerful.
don't agree.
Yeah.
I believe, but on the other side of that is performance consulting. To me, that is expert consulting in the human space. It's evidence-based. It's not somebody with a Ph.D. in inventory control coming in and telling a company how to run their inventory control systems. In HR field, there is a huge amount of research in human behavior and human systems. What works, what doesn't work, what's best practice, what isn't best practice. And when we give a client advice as an expert, it better be based on research-based evidence.
Yeah, that's really good. I think there's so much I want to say, and I'm watching the time because this is rich. But I want to go to the next point, and then I'm going to turn it over, David, to you for the next the next area. But the second part of this question is, so what differentiates ODC from HR or IO Psych or training and development or coaching? What separates ODC from these other fields? What makes it unique?
Well, I think part of it is just what I talked about, the non-directive approach. A lot of HR is compliance driven. HR is based on employment laws of the nation in which your organization is doing business. And if you're Coca-Cola and you're doing business in 200 nations, then you have to comply with the labor laws in every one of the countries in which you're doing business. And your HR people better know what those labor laws are, or their CEO, the company's CEO, might end up in jail because they violated a law. And that could happen in the US under ERISA if the CEO doesn't manage the company pension plan the right way. He could go to jail. And I say he because only 14% of CEOs are women. So in the Fortune 500, so only 14%. So I might as well use male pronoun, not being sexist, just being. My point is that OD is all about non-directive facilitation of change efforts in organizations. Training, a field I've spent a lot of time in. I built the ATD competency model for years. I did 5 of those. I'm one of two people that built their certification, which is pretty well recognized, the CPTD designation. And training is about changing individuals by giving them new knowledge, new attitudes, and new skills, period. It is a change effort, but it's more focused. It's a micro level change effort. OD tends to focus on groups. Yes, there are exceptions. We can do individual coaching and use OD methods for that. And that could be individually focused and it could be skill based. So in that area, I see an overlap between training and development, which ATD now calls talent development, and organization development.
Yeah.
But the TD model actually encompasses OD. So it's a bigger field than OD. So you have to distinguish between training as one component of a larger field and OD, which is a different segment of the same larger field of practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to switch it over, but I find that talent development, I like your definition around this notion that it focuses on the individual and helping an individual develop new skills, attitudes, and behaviors. And talent development suggests that, right? You're developing talent. So to put OD underneath talent development is really kind of a misnomer because OD is at a systems level looking at change at the system down to the individual level. And I think it's just because we haven't done a good job of differentiating the professions and how they're unique. And they try to co-opt each other to try to kind of claim their value. So that's my opinion. That's my soapbox. But I can't. Go ahead.
I even did a research study on how companies define talent development. And there's actually many definitions of that term. It is not an agreed. The word talent itself has about 15 different meanings.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we'll talk more about this. I really appreciate that, Bill, and I'm glad you're part of us thinking about the field and the book that we're doing and stuff like that, which David Bright is also a part of. So, David, let me turn it over to you for the next topic area.
Sure. So our next question is to think about historical figures or influential figures in the field of OD. So in your view, who are the key historical leaders and thinkers whose work anchors the field of ODC? And maybe you could list your top 3 to 5.
Well, I still go with that very old article that Steve probably remembers, OD as a religion. I don't know if he remembers that article, but to me, that was a seminal work in the field. And they said OD is very much like a religion because it has its prophets. Bennis, Beckert, and Penn being 3 key figures. And of
Say the
course,
3 again. Beckert, Bennis, and who?
Bennis, Beckert, and Penn.
Okay.
And then I would add Shine to that group. So we would end up with 4 major prophets of the field. OD, like a religion, has its holy book. So the Addison Wesley series of OD has those books that were the major works of Bennis and Beckert and Shine and many other people in the field. They're still classics in the field, even though some of those books were written in the 60s and never updated. So I think seminal figures in the field are those founders, and we could include Rollin Sullivan amid that group. The major difference with him, he was a member of that generation. He just never published the way Shine did, the way Bennis did, the way Beckert did. And he wasn't as well known in the field over time, but he was one of that group. So a lot of other people I would rank in that field as well. Warner Burke in the more recent generation, and Chris Worley, I would rank him in that major group. And those would be some of the people I would list.
Okay. Who would you see as the current voices shaping ODC's future, and what makes their contributions stand out?
Well, not to sound like a brown noser, but I would list Steve Cady as one of those because he's extremely prominent in the field, and his name's all over the place. So he's one of those. I would list him. David Jameson, clearly, he's clearly very influential. Maybe not as published as a lot of others, but clearly well known in the field of OD. And Diana Whitney, I would put her in that group. Jackie Stavros, I'd put her in that group. So I don't know who. I think you could debate that question.
Yeah,
Of course.
that's really great.
Thank you.
So let's go to the next one here. This is going to be hard for you to keep it concise. So this is going to be a tough one for you.
Well,
Let's see
it's
if you can
always
do
hard for me to keep it concise. My wife is always after me to give one-word answers to questions rather than talk like a professor and give a whole lecture to answer a question.
it. Oh God, I got a funny story I could tell you. Oh, about my son saying, "Oh, Dad, I said, who would you rather have lecture you and who would you have yell at you?" And I said, "Dad, I want you to yell at me and Mom to lecture me." Because he doesn't want me lecturing him. So I get that. So all right. So theories, models, and frameworks. So let's think about what are your favorite theories, models, and frameworks in the field of ODC? What are your favorite ones? So your top 5 favorite ones?
I still look to the action research model and its many variations. I still look at the original action or appreciative inquiry model and its variations. And I think those are 2 key seminal frameworks that I refer to. I have to introduce my students to some old concepts like Johari window, which was popular at one time, then it fell out of favor. Now it seems to be coming. Force field analysis, you'd think everyone knew what that was, but surprisingly they don't. And that's still a good concept. So I'd mention those as some of the foundational.
Yeah, that's really good. I'll turn it over to you, David. I think that gets that category. I'll turn it over to you for the next one.
I'm thinking, Steve, maybe we need, given our time constraints, we could go down to the why questions. Would you agree?
I think what we'll do is what I'm going to do is we're going to pause and say bye and keep going and ask them, and anybody can stay after, because I think we need to go through this. So it's okay.
Okay. Well then, what do you see as the top 3 to 5 essential competencies for practitioners, and then the separate competencies for scholars who are advancing theoretical and empirical aspects of ODC?
For practitioners, I would say facilitation skill is an important major competency and the behaviors associated with it. It says consultation, which I would regard separate from facilitation, of course. Ability to observe group dynamics and be able to interpret what's going on multiple levels would be 3 key competency areas. And then some of the typical ones that we would expect of everyone, like writing skill, which we can no longer take for granted from a lot of people, as we've found, and public speaking skill, the ability to talk to groups and individuals. That too, we can't take for granted anymore. We hear employers complaining that graduates come out of accounting and engineering schools with the inability to work face to face with other people. So that's OD people at minimum must have those abilities to interact effectively with individuals and groups. So So those would be some of the major competencies I would list.
Okay. How about on the scholarship side?
On the scholarship side, it seems that at least at Penn State, all of our students want to do qualitative work. And we have to pull teeth to get them to do basic stat, which is a problem. I think you need both. I think you have to have good mixed methods if you're going to be in scholarship. Now, I can see why qualitative methods is popular and necessary in this field, because so much of what we have, we're a pre-theoretical field. By that I mean we don't have well-regarded theories that can be falsified or verified. And so that means we do a lot of exploratory theory building, and you do that properly with qualitative methods. So that's why so many of our students end up doing qualitative work. In recent years, I bet I could count on one hand how many quantitative dissertations we've had.
Yeah,
Right.
that's interesting.
Thank you.
So on the you touched on some of this around the the foundational knowledge, and so we're looking at explicit, specific foundational pieces of knowledge. So of your 174 plus books, what would be a couple of those that you think are important for people in ODC to have? And you mentioned the six pack and the Addison Wesley series of books. Any other books and or key articles you'd want to make sure someone read if you gave them some advice?
Well, I mentioned OD as a religion. I'd have to look it up. It's quite old. That was published many years ago, probably in the 60s. Well, of course, I like to think Practicing OD is one of those important books. Don't you think, Steve?
Mm-hmm.
But and many editions of that book, we're now going into the 5th edition. That book, we actually wanted to change the title of it because from one edition to the next, it changed radically. And some of those editions are 90% different, to the extent that they're actually different books. So, but the publisher insisted that we keep the same title because of the brand name image. So that remind me what the question was again.
What would be your top list of books and articles that you'd want to make sure someone read? A short list of reading of books and articles.
Yeah, I think mostly of books, and I think, of course, of my own, but over the years, Shine's work on process consultation seems like essential reading. Books that were foundational for specific OD interventions, like Kathy Dannemiller's work and whole scale change. Let's see, Becker's book on confrontation meetings, pretty important in today's day and age of conflict, dealing with conflict. Old book, but still important, I think. Levinson's book on org diagnosis, I still use that book. In fact, that's one of the books I checked out of the library when it came due. I just paid the fine and bought the book from the library rather than return it.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, cool. All right, so Dave, you want to close us out? And
Yeah,
for
let's.
those of you that have to go, thank you for coming. We're just going to go a few more minutes to the last set of questions, and we're wrapping up. But for those of you that are here, thank you for coming, and we'll have another one next week. Just look on the www.bgsu.edu/change conference, or just emails or LinkedIn posts and things like that to see who's coming up next. So David, you want to keep going?
Yeah. So to close out our conversation, let's return to kind of the big picture for the field. And so what would you describe as the mission of the field of OD? What does it contribute to the world when at its best?
Well, I would say that it helps make sure that all voices are heard, or that all voices have are asked to contribute to decisions affecting people involved. I think that is key contribution of OD that often gets forgotten at a time where a lot of managers would love to play dictator in the interest of speed, and they think speed trumps anything else. So they don't want to take time to go through what Shine calls humble inquiry and ask people's opinions, then use that information to advantage. Instead, they think that given their position as CEO or as a senior leader, or even as a manager or supervisor, they're expected to know everything. And they shouldn't have to ask other people for input. And they think that's a sign of weakness. So I think OD provides that greater focus on soliciting opinions from many different quarters. If you believe in the value of 360-degree assessment, I think you have to believe in the value of OD, of hearing from many perspectives. And then I think OD also brings an emphasis on EQ, emotional intelligence, which I think is also sadly lacking in many managers and decision makers today. They don't care about other people's feelings, they just do it. They don't care who they hurt. So I think that leads to an Elon Musk saying that empathy is for losers. That's a direct quote.
Right. Right. So when we are fulfilling that mission at its best, giving voice, creating a context for the continuous development of EQ, look, what are the outcomes? What are the outcomes when this aspiration, this mission is achieved?
I think you get some more sustainable change when you're willing to listen to all or most voices around a problem or a proposed solution or an action plan or metrics. I think that when you solicit many voices to provide input, you take honest steps to deal with sources of resistance, objections to the change, that you're going to get a smoother adoption and you're going to get more sustainable change over time. So that's one contribution, one output I think we get from OD is sustainability. And another output is the recognition that feelings are as important as facts. Perception is reality. I've had more than one manager say to me, that's not true. In this company, we only deal with facts. I say, really? The stock market changes from 1 second to the next based purely on the perception that a company's management will do better in making money than their competitors. That's pure perception. That's based on pure feeling. And the stock market is the essence of capitalism. And they don't want to hear that.
Thank you. I think those are very helpful answers. So, If you think about the future of OD, what role should our field take in the world?
I think a major challenge facing us is going to be posed by AI on several levels. One level is that now you can create AI bots based on the work of individuals. I've already been approached by a guy in India who wanted me to give him all of my books so that he could create a Rothwell that he could sell to other people based on if they had a problem with succession planning or with OD, they could consult Rothwell and get an answer. And that would basically render me obsolete. And he would commercialize my intellectual property. And I said, what am I getting out of that? And he said, well, you'll become more famous. So that wasn't too helpful. But I think that since you can already get online therapists that are AI engineered, you can get a therapist online that's a bot that's AI engineered. Why can't we do that with OD people?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's gonna be you know, very interesting as we go into the future. Well, David, it's good to have you here. Thanks. I appreciate you being a part of this. This is a lot of fun. We're learning a ton. Bill, love you. I think you're awesome. I'm just so glad that I get to know you and that you're just a phone call away. I'm just feel grateful for that. Ken, it's good to see you, and Rihanna and Jake and Maria, and Gail and others that have been here today. Thank you all. We had a whole nice group of people here today. That was great. And so we have more to come. We have the series goes through December. I think we have our final one. You can check all the ones out, and we'll have recordings. If you ever want to get a recording, you just go back to the advertisement for this, with our digital brochure, and we just populate it with watch the video, and we're doing that at this point. But this has been great, and Bill, thank you. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you all very soon.
Bye.
Bye, Bill.